Welcome to the press room. I'm Shadisha George Mattis, your host for this evening's program. On Wednesday evenings at 8, right here on Searchlight's Facebook page and YouTube channel, we discuss issues of national importance and how they affect the Vincentian public. As a Vincentian student of political science and international relations, I am pleased to be leading this evening's discussion on youth and politics in SVG. This evening, the question that I am posing to you, our viewers, as well as to our panelists is politics broken in SVG? Is party politics broken in SVG? We will pay particular attention to addressing voter apathy and anti-politics among our youth. Yes, this evening, we'll be taking out our stethoscopes and checking the heartbeat and overall health of politics in SVG, particularly among our youth. From the outset, it is worth noting that politics has, for a very long time, been perceived negatively, so that when we hear politicians being described as deceptive liars and corrupt individuals, we must also tell ourselves that these assertions are not new. However, in recent times, politics seems to lack the ability to excite and enthrall, and appears to have resulted in low political participation among our youth. How can we fix these growing anxieties? Is politics broken in SVG? Is party politics broken in SVG? It's not too early to start posting your questions in the comment section below. We will try to answer them all during the final segment of the program. For this evening's program, I am thrilled to be joined by Dr. Dalano DaSouza, lecturer in economics at the University of the West Indies, Cave campus, Laverne King, entrepreneur and a PRO of the New Democratic Party, and Augustine Ferdinand, research assistant to the Prime Minister. Before we take a short break, I invite you to share the live everywhere, on Twitter, on Instagram, on WhatsApp, on iMessages, and right here on Facebook. When we come back, we will be joined by our panelists.
I got my COVID-19 vaccine and my booster shot to ensure that I am protected. I've never been tested positive for COVID-19, and even if I did contract the virus, I've never been sick. And I'm confident that the COVID-19 vaccine significantly contributed to that. The vaccines are safe, they are effective, and they're one of the ways that we can navigate this pandemic together. If you've not yet considered vaccination or getting your booster shot, I encourage you to do so today. Get vaccinated.
welcome back. We extend a warm welcome to the press room to Dr. Dalano DaSouza, Ms. Laverne King, and Mr. Augustine Ferdinand. Now, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves because if I am to do that, I am sure that this could take up the entire program. So let's start with you, Dr. DaSouza. Could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Good evening, and Shadish, and good evening to our viewers. Thank you for having me in the press room. A little bit about me. I'm Vincentian, as you know, from Central Kingston Redemption Shops, to be exact. I've been born and raised in St. Vincent and Grenadines. I'm currently a lecturer in economics at UWI Cave and that's basically it. I'm eager to get into our discussion tonight, and I look forward to the insights that I'm going to glean from my fellow panelists.
Mhm. And we're eager to hear what you have to say, Dr. D'Souza. Augustine?
Well, thank you, Miss George. Good night to everyone who are joining us on the live on Searchlight page in the press room. As you know, I'm Augustine Ferdinand, and I have a bachelor's in political science and law. I'm the research assistant to the Prime Minister. And it's great that we can have this discussion here pertaining to youth in politics, discuss issues surrounding youth in politics itself, and also what affects our young people that may hinder them or discourage them from engaging meaningfully in this process. So I'm eager as well to get into this discussion tonight. I'm quite sure many of our listeners are waiting for us to dive into that.
Great. Laverne?
Hi, Shalisha. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm happy. My name is Laverne King. I'm an entrepreneur. I have about two businesses currently that I manage. I am also the public relations officer for the New Democratic Party. I'm excited to be a part of this discussion this evening. I think that I'm still considered youth in politics, so I'm happy to be able to be in what I would call it belly of it, to bring honest conversation to what I see and my perspective of what is going on in St. Vincent and Grenadines. And I hope truly that I'm able to give perspective, not just as a political person, but as a youth, as a Vincentian, as somebody who is seeing what is going on in the country at present.
Well done. Yes, Laverne, you're still considered a youth in politics, although you may have more experience than most of us. I am just going to jump straight into the program. And the very first question that I'm going to pose to you, Laverne, is do you remember the specific moment when your interest in politics was piqued?
Yes, actually. A lot of people perhaps don't know this, but my grandfather was St. Clair Robinson, and he actually was one of the founding fathers of the New Democratic Party with Sir James Mitchell. So a lot of people tend to say that politics run in my blood. In fact, Robbie, as they would have called him, would have been the person who was supposed to run in North Leeward. Instead, when they got the now late Calder Williams, who died just recently, Sir James would have wanted my grandfather at the time to be the representative. However, the people in North Leeward said no Calder, no vote, and that goes to show the importance of the electorate and listening to people. Later on, my interests would grow because I have a sister, Shelley, who was always listening. Interestingly, she used to listen to Shake Up a whole lot. And she was a big fan of Glenn Jackson, if I must say that. And we used to always have conversations in our household because then we had someone in our household who was not NDP, growing up in an NDP household. And so we always had exchanges in our household. And the thing about her is that she was interested in politics beyond just St. Vincent. And so engaging in that conversation from then, probably since I was in first form, it was always good. So I think I grew up in a household that typically listened to politics. And later on, I think to become more active as I am now, I think I saw when I was finishing my degree in Jamaica, I looked at St. Vincent and I saw the country and I didn't like it. I didn't like where we were heading. I thought that we can do better. And I thought that people like myself, Dalano, could get involved. And yes, you too, Augustine, help to, make the country better. And I thought that I could make a difference. And as a result, I decided to get more actively involved in politics because I wanted to see my country do better. Because quite frankly, I'm not satisfied with where we are right now.
Augustine, what about you? Now, there are several layers to Laverne's response. Why did you become so interested, or what made you so interested in politics?
First of all, I have an interest in community and nation building. As a young person, I served over 11 plus years in the cadet force. I was one of the persons who, when we had the distribution of these emergency plan booklets in North Leeward and North Windward, went down and distributed them. I carried instruments up the volcano, did beach cleanups and the like. So I have a great interest in community development. I'm now in JCs. That is why I'm also a member of the Labour Party, because to me at the time, as a young person, very young, even before I went to the University of the West Indies, I was in college. That's when I officially became a member of the Unity Labour Party. And looking around, I said to myself that this political party is the one that I want to join because it is progressive. It links with my ideals, what I stand for, and therefore I joined to continue in making sure that we contribute to the community, address concerns that people have, etc. But my formal entry was in 2010. At the time, I think David Brown was the candidate in South Leeward. And again, because I have interest in community development, his sister, April Brown, I went to her actually, and I said, I want to join the youth arm. And from there, that is how I went on to radio, the party's radio station, Star Radio. This is before I attended college. And from there, I moved up, I went to university. I continued to engage in meaningful discourse on radio, do community work, be part of the youth arm. And now I'm an executive member of the party, a research officer of the Prime Minister, and I still do Shake Up, which Laverne mentioned a while ago, as the host in continuing meaningful discourse and discussion. And on that program too, people raise issues and concerns, and you deal with them. You send those messages up the chain of command and see where they can be addressed. So mainly it's about community development and people, and that's why I'm here where I am.
Great. Dalano, what about you? When did your affinity for politics arise?
Well, for me, I wouldn't say that it kind of just took me, but in some ways it kind of took me. As a young boy growing up in Redemption Shots at the time, I remember vividly in 2001 when the elections, on election night and in the run up to the election, at that time I would have lived opposite Conrad Sayers, who was the candidate for Central Kingston at the time. And I remember as a young boy, I remember the sort of fanfare that was involved around politics at the time. What also struck me at the time too was the sort of tribalistic approach that some of my neighborhood, some persons in my neighborhood were taking towards politics. And that sort of rubbed me the wrong way in some respects. And for a time, I had sort of pushed that aside in terms of politics. I went through the next several years not really being too keen in terms of being involved in the process apart from voting and, of course, keeping abreast of what's happening. But then I came to UWI, and when I came to UWI, I sort of was able to recognize the transformative power of leadership and policy. So as some of you may know, I was the guild president of the UWI Cable Campus. I also served as the hall chair for the Sir Philip Sherlock Hall. And it was really during that time that I realized that this whole notion of leadership and this whole notion of helping community service, as Augustine would have put it, it really can transform lives. And like Laverne, I would have been keeping a keen eye on St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and of course living abroad now for some time. I always want to impart what I learn in terms of what can St. Vincent do better, what can the region do better, and for me that's really where my interest in politics is currently, in terms of just being better, seeing better politics, seeing youth involvement, policies that work for our people, policies that don't work just for the elite. And that's really where I am now, in terms of my approach to politics. But it was really the realization that by stepping forward and putting your hand up and saying, listen, I can help make change. And I realized that you can't sometimes, of course, there are other means to contribute, but I realized sometimes that the most direct way to do so is in policy making. And of course, you can't necessarily get into policy making from that high level without involving politics.
And having said all that, do you think that politicians and political parties are speaking to young people? Dr. DaSouza.
Currently, I sometimes I wonder if we are. I think for me personally, I don't necessarily consider myself as young as I used to be. I'm now 32. But when I look at the political platform, particularly in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I look at what the rhetoric that is coming out, particularly in the last election, I was very concerned about a lot of the rhetoric that was coming out of the last election cycle, a lot of divisive rhetoric. There was a lot of xenophobia, for example, with reference to the Chinese and so on. And that sort of struck a chord with me. I was disappointed. And I feel like in terms of the youth now, I think the youth have a greater appreciation in terms of new perspectives. And so I don't necessarily think that our government now and our parties, our politics generally, is really reaching the youth that in a way that it should be. And so for me, I don't think we're necessarily speaking to the youth right at this in terms of where politics is right now.
Augustine, do you feel the same way?
No, well, I beg to differ. Sometimes when I normally hear the term divisive politics, and sometimes I believe we confuse it with competitive politics, because competitive politics may appear as divisive, but it's just competitive, especially where you have a more or less two parties contending for the power balance in parliament. In terms of youths, there's always room for improvement, always. In any government, in any economy, there's always room for improvement. But I've seen, and I remember making mention last week, not even last week, this week, as to how effective policies of the government can be. And I made mention of Marshall, who is a catman in town. And Marshall now has a son who is a nurse. Marshall's son went through Thomas Saunders and is now a nurse. Dr. Kwashi attended the Boys Liberty Lodge. He received a disadvantaged student loan, went off to UWI Mona campus, received scholarships after that, did his master's and also his PhD. And he's now soon going to be working in the Ministry of National Security. Those are two instances where the extreme persons from disadvantaged positions have been able to take advantage of the education policy of the government and rise. So that is just one example. There are other examples where the policies of the government are reaching young people. You may talk about the housing policy, middle income and low income homes, where persons who are in their early 30s, late 20s are being able to own a home. There are persons who are young, join the government, and because of their job, it's more secured. They are able to get a loan to also build a house, have ownership. So these are just few examples as to how the policy of the government are benefiting youth, but there's always room for improvement, And as DaSouza rightly say, in these positions, you always find and look to see how you can tweak. So, for example, when you realize that the government have the poverty reduction policy, and you realize that in certain constituencies, you are not seeing the numbers like North Windward, Central Leeward, you're not seeing the numbers move. You therefore use a more micro-targeting approach to reduce poverty. And the Zero Hunger Initiative, which is really, really good. And what that initiative does, not only it provides some income support to the families there, whether $350 and the like of food, but the young people in those homes are given the opportunity to learn a skill so that after attaining their certificate, they can use that skill to get a job and truly be independent and make an income, which is more targeting to try get the numbers down, which also benefit young people. But again, in terms of policy, these things take time, and you can't reach everybody at the same time. So those are just few examples I would make mention in terms of how the policies of the government benefit young people. And there's of course prime, as you know, everybody leaving college would not necessarily be able to get a government job, but nonetheless, you're going to have persons looking for job alternatives, and so you provide that as an avenue as well to make income and create employment.
Okay, now Laverne, in your introduction, you stated that when you came back to St. Vincent, you didn't like what you saw. What exactly did you see? And I don't want exactly to preempt you, but was it a case where you saw a St. Vincent and the Grenadines where politicians weren't speaking to young people?
I think that we must be honest in our conversations when we talk about what exists in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And everybody knows that a lot of the policies that comes out targeted towards youth, they only come out within the election year. And what that says to me is that outside of the election year, there's no regard for the young people as it relates to the policy of the government. One of the things that when you talk about what I didn't like or what I saw were politician kids getting jobs. What I saw were people well connected to the government getting scholarships. What I saw were people being fired based on political victimization. And I didn't like it. And that's why I decided to get involved. I think that an undeniable fact is that St. Vincent and the Grenadines has more than 45% unemployment youth rate. And that's something that is just undisputable. My God, I think it might have gone up now by the time, with all of the hits from COVID and so forth. What are we doing specifically to make that better? We talk as well about education. I remember in the last election, the New Democratic Party had proposed, listen, student loans is killing our young professionals, killing us. I know it. It's something that I don't hide. I would love to be able to service mine. I'm sure all of us on this know about student loan. We talk about it. And the government comes up in the election year and they decide, because it was resonating with young professionals, that, we're going to reduce the rate of student loan too. And it shows that cycle of creating policies for political expedience and not creating policies as a matter of sustainability, which is what we want. When you decide and you sit in a policy-making position, what you want to do is create sustainable plans that will actually see a turnaround. Because what you do with a country, you're looking at what is happening overall and you try to say, how can I fix this aspect so that it can help us in this other way? So when we have things such as prime grants and so forth, and personally, I have nothing at all against a prime grant. But again, it goes back to the point that these things are often introduced only in an election year for political expedience. And we consider what exactly is the program that is there with the grant to help these people with these new businesses to be sustainable, you know. And where is the accountability in giving state funds as well? How many of those businesses are still existing today? I'm quite happy with it. In fact, I would love to get one, to be quite honest. And when we look at things, for example, such as like sporting, and we think about how um, a field, a track was opened the other day. This is something that was promised more than 17, 18 years ago, but done yet again in an election year for political expedience. And I'm saying that what we want to do, apathy often comes from when politicians make big promises and they don't deliver on it, and people grow despondent. People can no longer rely on a politician's word. And that is why oftentimes people say, "Oh, you're a politician, I don't believe you." And that happens when you continue to throw out big plans out there, and then you get into office, you forget the people, and you're no longer relatable to them. I think that's what we need in St. Vincent and Grenadines are politicians who are and leaders, politicians and leaders, because I don't think that the conversation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines or development should only be squared at the foot of politicians. We need people who are in tune with civics as well to speak up and to join in the conversation about how we can be a better developed country. That's the absolute truth. But when we look at the policies that currently exist in the government and the way in which they're implemented haphazardly, only at a time when it is beneficial to them so that they can remain in office, my God, there's so much more that we can do as a country, you know. I look even, for example, at the orange economy, and I think about how there's so much that we can do with it to benefit. There's so many other people with so many talents. And people would say to you, when you see a government show, when you see people travel, you see the usual suspects all the time. And other people are saying, well, can't someone else get an opportunity? And so we need to restore meritocracy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There's so much more that we need to be doing that we're not doing. And the facts, the data, everyday life, people see it. We just simply can do better. In fact, I would like to know what has happened to crime since election, you know?
Shadisha, can I just jump in there quickly?
Sure.
And as Augustine and Laverne were speaking, I think in terms of youth engagement with politics, I think the young people now are looking for a different type of politics. I think the young people now are looking for more progressive policies. When I think about that, I can think about things such as integrity legislation. I can think about things such as freedom of information legislation, both of which this current government had promised, by the way, and have yet to deliver in any meaningful way. I could think about things such as more accountability and transparency within the government. And finally, I think a big bit of why a lot of young people are turned off from the current political process is a lack of meritocracy, like Laverne would have said, whether it be real or imagined. Because at the end of the day, we have to recognize that perception matters. And if the general perception out there is that once other people eat enough food, as we did say, then at the end of the day, persons are going to become apathetic to politics in general. And we have to work to correct that and start to bridge those gaps that show persons that if you work hard enough, you put in the work, you do what you're supposed to do, and you have a chance to get somewhere and to make something of yourself and for your family. And I think lately, that isn't the general sentiment in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I think it is now, where once other people eating the food, and that's the perception at least that I get. And that's what I would say on that.
Okay, so my next question to you is, are political parties demonstrating that it's a priority to address these issues?
I wouldn't say that. I won't necessarily say so. I think Laverne made a great point about the political business cycle, and as somebody who has studied the political economy of education policy, that was my PhD thesis. I would have looked at education policy from 1970 all the way up to 2014. So I would have read every budget from that period, for that entire period. So I know about the political business cycle. I know when promises are made, and it's usually around the time of heading into elections. We've tracked the expenditure. We've seen it around election times. Spending goes up in terms of health, in terms of education, and that's what we see headed into a budget. And it's not unique to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, mind you. Let me be clear. It's not unique to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It's part of politics as we've grown to know it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the way that we should go forward. But I don't think that our politicians are prioritizing youth enough, particularly in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I think there's a lot more that can be done. We speak about the education revolution, which, of course, like I said, I've studied intimately, and there are tremendous benefits to it. I think there are some shortcomings as well as I think everybody here would admit. But something as simple as the student loan that Laverne mentioned. I myself had a student loan at 8% when I'm looking at my colleagues in Antigua and other countries with 4% and so on student loans. And recognize, of course, even from an economic standpoint, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy when your student loan is so high in terms of your repayments. When you finish studying, how do you how do you climb out of that hill? How do you get to the top of that? How do you keep your student loans under control? We look at the other countries in the region, and of course, sometimes persons are going to say, "Why are you comparing St. Vincent to Antigua? Why are you comparing to St. Kitts?" But at the end of the day, St. Vincent has a larger population than Antigua and Barbuda. St. Vincent has a larger population than St. Kitts and Nevis. And in some respects, they're catering to the youth in more meaningful ways than we are with our larger population. And so inevitably, you are going to compare. And so even in terms of, so that's education. Laverne would have mentioned sports. I think we're not doing enough there in terms of sports. I think things were promised for quite some time. Of course, we have limited resources and we try to manage as best as possible. But something as simple as a minister responsible for youth directly, things like that to make people, even if it's just for show, who can we pinpoint now as the minister of youth who's leading the charge for youth activities in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? And these are things that young people are looking at. Again, like I said, whether real or perceived, this is the perception. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Laverne, I just want to rewind a little and piggyback on your whole notion of voter apathy. Have you encountered youths who are disengaged and apathetic while campaigning? And what exactly do you say to them about the importance of their political participation?
The important thing when we look at youth apathy, do we have a definition of like youth these days of what do you consider the age gap for the purposes of this discussion? What age gap would you consider it?
Well, I was thinking basically from if we're looking at the voting population from 18 to 35 at least. Some would go as far back as 15 to, let's say, 24 there, or to 25.
Okay. A lot of times in my walkabouts, I've walked length and breadth of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and sometimes I'm discouraged. I'll be honest. Sometimes I feel like leaving St. Vincent. I feel like packing up and don't come back, because you look sometimes at what is going on in other territories right next door to us. If you go to St. Lucia and you spend a week or two, you don't want to come back here. If you go to Jamaica, Barbados, any of those places, like you just go somewhere else, and the development, the social life, you just feel as though you feel as though St. Vincent is stuck in a time loop and we're being left behind while everybody else is running ahead of us. And it is hard for young progressives to want to stay here. I mean, Dalano, you didn't come back, at least not yet. But sometimes I go. Sometimes I go and I meet with people, young people, and they will say, listen, I finished college and I've been done for like 2-3 years and I can't get a job. Joblessness is a big thing in St. Vincent. You meet as well people who is on the YES program and they're supposed to transition out of that. But we meet them doing the job of a full-time employee on the YES program salary. And they've been doing that for 4-5 years. And we have to stop and ask ourselves, is this the best that we can do for our young people? And the answer is no. Because, like I said, apathy is created when politicians continue to flip-flop and politicians continue to make big promises that they cannot live up to, and people grow despondent. If you keep on telling me over and over, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and then when push comes to shove, you're feeling the brunt of the pain. You're feeling it. Because after the feel-good sensation of every election, the reality of life comes back. You know, I think, have to create a climate in St. Vincent and the Grenadines where people can feel free to associate with any political party that they wish to. I'll tell you the honest truth. I have attended political protests in St. Vincent before. And I lay on my bed sometimes and I wonder to God after that protest if the police is going to come and get me. And sometimes it gives me anxiety. And I'm pretty sure that that's not the type of state that we want to be living in. People should be free to do those things. Other young people have met me and say, boy, Laverne, I want to come, but there are things that is happening in our democracy that is hindering people from participating. And if we're honest about it, our democracy really and truly is not alive and well. A lot of people as well would say that I want to get involved, but I'm afraid I would lose my job. And to argue that political victimization is not blatant in St. Vincent would be lying. It would be a straight up lie. We have ample examples of it. And I mean, we could go back to the situations of the teachers who were dismissed, Vinette Frederick, who ran right after UE, who she was taken to court, who she was called unorthodox and all of that, won her case to now haven't gotten her money. I think that we see as well in St. Vincent where it appears as though if you are an entertainer for the current regime in office, automatically when it's time to travel and do other things, you're the one who is selected, and people grow wary of it. And what you'll find happen is that if you're in a canoe and only one side is rowing, what's going to happen is you're going to go in a circle. That's all that's going to happen, because the full potential where both sides are able to paddle so that we can move forward, it's not happening. And that's what's happening in St. Vincent now. One side keeps paddling, we're going around instead of sharing around. The pie in St. Vincent is not very big enough, but my God, it can be shared. What we need both people, because the truth is there will always be people who support the ULP. There will always be people who support the New Democratic Party and other minority parties. But what we need, people who are our best minds to take our country forward. And sometimes the best asset may not necessarily be somebody from within your camp. And until we get to that level of political maturity where somebody, if they say something that they disagree with the government about, that they're going to find themselves with rifle guns at their door tomorrow morning. I mean, we cannot be serious about getting young people and Vincentians involved in politics when we exist in a country of fair.
Our young people clearly have a lot to say. When we come back, we will continue to discuss this evening's topic, is politics broken in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We will be right back.
Searchlight Online, now stronger and better, and with more options for everyone. Download the free app and access the e-paper and breaking news. Check out our e-papers read aloud and translation features. Read our e-paper in different formats, even when you are offline. Access our online archive as far back as 2005. Only interested in viewing ads? Go directly to our print ad marketplace. Subscribers get exclusive access to a full-color midweek e-paper edition, in addition to the weekend edition. Affordable monthly, quarterly, biannual, and annual e-subscription subscription plans. Book, submit, and pay for advertisements online. Go to www.searchlight.vc for more details. Searchlight, journalism you can trust. Now stronger, better, and with more options for everyone.
I'm Shanika John, Chief Health Promotion Officer acting in the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Environment. Since St. Vincent and the Grenadines started administering the COVID-19 vaccines, we've encouraged persons from different age group, different risk factors to get vaccinated. For those persons who have contracted the COVID-19 virus, vaccinated or unvaccinated, the severity and the impact of the virus is significantly different. If you've not yet considered getting the vaccine, I encourage you to do so today. Get vaccinated.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, I'm joined by Dr. Dalano DaSouza, Ms. Laverne King, and Mr. Augustine Ferdinand, and we are discussing Is Party Politics Broken in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Now, Augustine, having heard what Laverne said, and I know something tells me that you do not share the same sentiments, what do you have to say with regard to the way in which our political leaders who are charged with driving politics and the political discourse in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? What does this tell you about that?
Well, given the topic, youth voter apathy, I honestly thought we were going into, well, some of the reasons persons may be alienated or discuss voter fatigue and the like. But interestingly, and I'm going through the figures, in the last general election, 66% of the electorate came out to vote. In the elections of 2015, 73% came out to vote. In terms of the special voter registration, where a lot of young people take the opportunity to register last minute. Last election, we had 3,194 persons who went through this process for ID card through the special voter registration. Among that number, reapplication and new registered voters under that special voter registration was 1,217. Now, I say that to say, in much as we are discussing youth voter apathy, the numbers show that by and large, people are engaged in the political process. You know, if you're looking at the numbers, one may say that it is satisfactory, but of course, there's always room for improvement. If you look at the participation fully, and I look on the Unity Labour Party side of things, we have, let me see, currently in Parliament, we have about 6 members of Parliament who are in their 30s. 6. I'll actually, well, not members of Parliament, actually 5.
They won't lose their job.
Because I put Luke in that category. You have Senator Bala, Senator Peter, Senator Morgan, the Minister of Youth, Dr. DaSouza. Yes, there's a Minister of Youth, Minister Brewster. And it's an interesting story because Minister Brewster, before 2020 election, was just a president of a youth arm within the Unity Labour Party. Not the president of the youth arm for the party itself, but one of the youth arms in the constituencies. He's now the Minister of Youth. He's Minister of Youth, Housing, and national mobilization. And you
in,
have
in that order, is it youth, housing, and
well,
I'm not saying I didn't know.
he's minister of housing, minister of housing, youth, so national mobilization. Yes,
But
Minister
I
Brewster.
think that's not to cross you, but that's kind of my point, where we
And
kind of have youth
he's
just
also
added
the
on
minister
to
of gender
something.
affairs.
I understand, and that's my point, where we kind of have you just tacked on to something else, where historically housing is a big ministry. I mean, that
But you
takes
know,
up.
interesting as you say, it's a big
So
ministry, and
I'm
I
not
think
going
it
to.
supposed to be point where such a young man who now enter politics has such a big ministry, and it shows the trust that the government have for young people. But I'll continue the minister of tourism as well.
Respectfully, Augustine, can I ask a question? Because
yes,
you're saying that he's the minister of youth. I know that he's the minister of youth, but I'm saying to you that part and parcel of my argument is that we've historically tacked on youth to other ministries, and so therefore youth kind of just falls through the crack in some respect. And I said that housing is a big ministry to start to illustrate the point that oftentimes when we tack on youth to other larger ministries, the youth get lost in terms of the policies and the things that come forward from that particular ministry. Also, too, you spoke about the 66% voter turnout. Can you speak to, I don't know if you have the numbers in terms of the age groups in terms of the voter
well, you won't be able to get the age group given
exactly,
the
and that's my point. So when you say that 66% turnout, and you said that 3,000 registered for ID card, well, you kind of need your ID card. So I'm not saying that. So
but the thing is,
the point is,
I don't think anyone will go through the special voter registration if they're not interested in voting.
I disagree, but what I want to say though is the stats that you put forward does not necessarily concretely show that youth are participating in the electoral process. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay, so
that I wanted to jump in on that point, because I know I visited the electoral office, and these are the demographics. I wanted to be able to get that. Quite frankly, I'm not a fan of the 15-day registration, particularly because there's no proper monitoring of it. We all know as well that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the voters list needs cleaning up. You have a voters list that's almost as big as the population of the country. So I don't see the voters list as a document of authority, to be honest. And we also have in situations where we've had places where you had 100% voter turnout for box and so forth. But as Dalano would have reiterated, that, and it's okay, Augustine, to take feedback in good spirit. You tack on youth onto other bigger ministries and it's stifled, and it shows a lack of priority that is placed on the youth, the youth objective and the youth mission and development. So it's okay to say, I get your point, Dalano. I think we could restructure it. It's fine to take a point.
One of the things I want to say is that is it important that we do not think that just by voting that somehow becomes like the gold standard.
That is why Shadisha, I went into now, other than voting, I went into in terms of actual participation in politics by looking at the members themselves.
What I want to say, or what I want to ask is, which is my very next question, is that columnist Renwick Rose in Friday's edition of the Searchlight newspaper, he raised the following issue. He said, there is no sign in the politics of the younger generation in both parties of any new political dispensation. Do you agree with this perspective, Augustine?
No, not at all. Because even looking within, like I mentioned, I didn't mention Luke Brown. You have Luke Brown, you have Senator Balla, Senator Peters, Senator Morgan, Minister Brewster, Minister James. And then you, of course, have in 40s Minister Gonzalez, the Minister of Finance, and Minister Caesar. But there are other young persons who you won't necessarily hear of nationally, who are integrally involved and engaged. And in addition to that, this is just looking at the participation in parliament. But as Dr. DaSouza highlights rightly, you also have to look at engagement in terms of policy framework. And I think when you even look in the state administration, in terms of permanent secretaries, you see some young persons who are leading ministries. For example, the PS in the Ministry of Education, PS Burke. You have PS in Tourism, Bonnet. You have even in terms of the in the Prime Minister's office, the secretary to the Prime Minister who actually studied at university with us. So you even have in the state administration persons who help with the framework of policy and the implementation of policy within the government. And I think it shows the government's trust and trust in the young people to move the country forward, and they having a say integral in what happens in the state administration. So that is why I don't share that opinion based on the evidence.
Okay. Laverne, would you say that our political parties have lost their sense of purpose with regard to connecting with young people in our country?
I see my friend Shabazz made a point in the comments section, and he said that voter apathy has nothing to do with the demographic of the parliament, and I'll tell you this: it is very easy for a young person or any person for that matter to get into politics when your party is in office. So shouting things like that, Augustine, is not really impressive. It continues to reiterate that other people are victimized when
it shows that there is youth participation, active participation at that level of decision making. That's where you really want to be.
It's not the same, Augustine. I'll be quite honest with you, because I'm not here to play party politics. If you ask me today or tomorrow, would I like to see more young people running for the younger people running for the NDP? I'm going to tell you yes, because I'm not here to continue to play the type of politics where you're making excuses and this and that and so forth. I'm not here for that. I'm here to be real about what exists in our country. And if we can stop being shields for our politicians and be honest, then the next generation of us who are looking forward to carrying our country to the next level will get there faster. So to talk about how you have this senator, that, what do they have to lose by getting involved at this point?
What do the youths have to gain by them being involved in the process?
So hold on until I give you way. If you look at what has been happening to other people who decided to get involved at the representative level and they happen to fail their bid, they're not reinstated with their jobs, they lose their livelihoods, they don't get automatic promotions, their families are affected by it. You take breath out of the mouths of kids. So for you to come and sit from a privileged position, might I say, that you have people in their 30s in office, it further reiterates what we say about how other people are victimized. And I'll say this: I know of at least 3 young persons who wanted to run in the last election. And one of them, young person, young entrepreneur. And their thing was, I think my business would suffer should we not, should the NDP not form government. The other person was saying, but I afraid this. And the next person was saying, they have a kid, they have this, they have their friend, they have their spouse rather, who is working in X ministry, and they think that it will affect their spouse work life. Now, when we exist in a situation like that, it says there's something wrong that is turning people off. And it is always easy, like I said, because if you look at it, When John Hahn and Carla Williams and those people and other people got involved in politics in the NDP as well, we had people running who were in their 20s and so forth. The bottom line is that we need to get out of boasting that you have young people in parliament when in truth and in fact they have nothing to lose. The party is in office. It's only gets sweeter and sweeter because we know that once your party is in office, and we've seen it, other people have to work their way up, whereas people closely associated to the Unity Labour Party, they seem to just become head of departments and so forth and get appointed to different missions and stuff like that. But I think that there needs to be a real reconnection with young people on both political parties to engage young people outside of the election period. I think that when we look at the activity of youth arms and so forth, I'd like to see you guys have something for young people outside of a Miss Unity Youth. I'd like to see another activity outside of that, because for me, I'm interested in developing our young people beyond just equipping them to give us a vote when it's time to cast a ballot. I'm interested in us developing programs where we can see young people having their soft skills developed. I'm interested in us developing better TVEC programs. I'm interested in seeing, for example, the Otley Hall project work, because that's millions of dollars just rusting away. Do you know that the kids at the technical college could benefit from that project being up and running? Because what you do there is that you marry education with on-the-job training, and instead of allowing thousands of dollars going out of the country when the yachts and the ferries go to Trinidad and other islands to be fixed, these people in the technical college are being trained to do this sort of work and could go into the marine industry instead, because we want this project to be an NDP white elephant to say it's a failed project. It's just rusting away down there. But we could tie this in to make more young people get jobs. This is how we need to think. We can't think that because this government was the one who started this project, we must not continue it because it's not in line. No, thousands of dollars of the Vincentian money was spent. So we as a people have to hold our governments more accountable. We can't just come on and only talk from our partisan perspective. We have to be honest. And that's the only way we can move our country forward.
But Laverne, I'm being honest. The thing is, from the heading, it says youth and politics in SVG. So I'm thinking on one hand, you look at those who may or may not go to vote and the reasons why. That is what I'm thinking all along. And then on the other hand, you look at actual participation in politics. And that was my point when I mentioned the members of parliament, because you said that what do they have to lose? And my thing is, youths have a lot to gain from having young persons directly involved in decision making. For example, we have from the United Nations, in terms of the 2020 resolution, youth participation in the democratic process. And it says here, young people are often excluded or overlooked as political candidates. And Shadisha, this is true in some instances. Politics is typically regarded as a space for politically experienced men, and while women are often disadvantaged in accumulating experience to run for office, young people are systematically marginalized because of their young age, limited opportunities, and projected lack of experience. Now, what I'm saying, I don't see that in St. Vincent and Grenadines, especially in particular in the government. That is what I'm saying. And young people have a lot to gain from having young persons, not only in parliament, which evidently we see in the government, but also in the state administration as persons to implement policy on behalf of the government.
Can I just jump in, Shadisha, quite quickly?
Yes.
You
sure,
asked,
I have a question for you.
Just in terms of my understanding or my interpretation of Renwick Rose's critique, in my mind, he's saying that he's not seeing a new dispensation. In other words, he's saying more of the same. including from what he's seeing from these younger candidates and younger members of parliament that Augustine is referring to. So in my mind, he's kind of, throwing a challenge out there, making the observation that even though, or while we may have, or notwithstanding the fact that we have some younger politicians or younger members of parliament, the rhetoric that is coming out of the party remains the same. The ideas coming out of the party remains of old. And so from my interpretation of what he's saying, of course I could be wrong, my interpretation is that he's not seeing a change that is going to ignite the passions of the young people, because it's more of the same from those persons who are in the privileged position to be, of course, younger MPs, younger parliamentarians, but they carry on more or less the same mannerisms. And that's something I personally observed as well, where we've seen politicians or younger persons go into politics, and I look at it and say, oh, this is a breath of fresh air. Let's see what's going to become of this. Let's see what they're going to come forward. And then you listen to them speak on the platform. You see the policies that they come, and it's along the party hymn book. And I'll be honest, and I think that's from my interpretation of what Renwick Rose is saying. I speak subject to correction, of course. That's what he's saying, that the younger persons are becoming indoctrinated with the politics of all, and that's why young people aren't being drawn to the process.
Okay, so let's talk about party philosophy. It would appear that both parties share the very same philosophy, and so there is really no distinction between, let's say, the NDP and the ULP. Do you think that there's a lack of choice and the lack of alternatives is really keeping our youth away from politics, Dalano?
I wouldn't necessarily say that the parties have the same philosophy. I saw Augustine's response when you said it. I think, in my mind, the Unity Labour Party has always been more leftward leaning than the NDP historically. We've and that's what we've observed. The NDP has been more democratic socialism as opposed to the ULP, where you kind of have a more leftward slant, and I don't think anybody on the panel would disagree with that. That's what we've seen from the ULP in terms of the policies that they've enacted. Bigger government in many respects, a heavy-handed or more involvement of government in terms of the provision of social goods and so public goods and so. That's what we've seen from the ULP. Whereas in terms of the history of the NDP, we always remember James Mitchell speaking more about let's get the economy working from the business perspective, and the government sort of acts as the lane of the pitch for the cricket to play, is the analogy that most people like to use. And that's what we've seen. But I think as we go on to talk about a lack of choice, I don't necessarily see it as having a lack of choice. I think there is, I think when you think about it, it can be sometimes difficult to distinguish between where the stance of the parties are. And I think even in terms of the longevity of this government now, if we see, for example, 21 years, you just celebrated 21 years, Augustine. I mean, when you look at it, there's no surprise that the party that's been entrenched, that has been putting policies in place, that has sort of developed the society or shaped the society in such a way. And it's inevitable for me to go back to that whole notion of perceived victimization. I always have to use the word perceived, because really, I imagine a lot of persons feel like there is that culture of nepotism, of cronyism within the system now, a lack of meritocracy and so on. And so I think there's a culture of fear, and I think that has sort of fueled this whole notion that persons are confused about a choice. I don't think it's that. I think persons are afraid of certain things within the society now, and I speak freely. And I think I acknowledge as well that I'm almost in a privileged position as well, because I have family, I have siblings, and when I hear them speak about being afraid to say certain things, being afraid to do certain things, being afraid to get involved in certain things that I do on a day-to-day here in Barbados freely. I criticize the government here in Barbados all the time. I write about it. My research speaks about it. And I never wonder about where my next meal is going to come from. And that, unfortunately, is something I've seen coming out of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I have to, I feel I would be remiss of me not to mention the sort of feeling I get when I hear those sort of things. And it's not to say that things aren't happening, that we haven't made some progress. I think it's important for us to note that even in terms of the economy, and as an economist, this really should be where my argument should be rooted. I think part of the apathy as well is that the economy isn't working for young people. And I think the young people in society, I mean, we spoke about the student loans, we spoke about the difficulty in finding jobs, and we speak about the low salaries, which of course, that's why some of our best and brightest are leaving St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That's why lately I've been advocating for minimum wage increases, for the implementation of unemployment insurance in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for other progressive things that are meant to get the economy working better, to bring in more money to provide jobs for young people. And I think until our economy is working, you're going to see that sort of disenchantment, because at the end of the day, I remember I always bring it up. I was in a meeting with Professor Sailor Backers, and one thing I made an argument for something, and he said, Dalano, it takes money to care. And that is the reality. Until the economy is working, we are going to see strains of this apathy that we speak of, because it's not working for young people. And some may argue it's not working generally, unless you're on a particular political spectrum, and I'll leave it there.
Before we take a break, Laverne, I would like to ask you and Augustine, would you say that the intensification of social media has contributed to cynicism among young people, Laverne?
You know, as someone working in digital media, can I take a plug? If you need a website, call me. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has, let me pull it up. I actually have that statistic right in front of me. I'll tell you exactly how many people. Hold on. As of 2022, we have 88,000 people on Facebook. No, 62,200 people on Facebook, which is almost as big as the voters list, right? We have 47,200 on Instagram, 26,000 on LinkedIn, and 8,100 on Twitter. And in the last election, we noticed that there was a heavy use of social media by both political parties. I think that a lot of people, a lot of ads were targeted towards young people. I don't know if it would have helped with cynicism, because I think what it did is that it allowed people to, I like to call there's slacktivism and activism. I think it enables more slacktivism, where people can stay behind their computer screen and kind of rant about what is going on as opposed to getting actively involved. I think that the emergence of social media has helped to make people more aware of what is going on. There's a lot of things that happen in St. Vincent and the Grenadines where we wouldn't have known about it. Like, for example, the situation with the senator and the Cornelius John thing. We would not have known about that had it not been for social media. You know, I still hope that he gets justice. But social media, I think, doesn't necessarily create more cynicism. We have to know how to use it to encourage people and to reach out to people. I still see ads for vaccination going on online, which is good. I think that what more politicians need to do is to utilize their social media outside of just the election period, like have monthly town hall meetings online to say what you observed in the constituency this month, get feedback from people about what they think can be done. I think there's just simple things that you can do to feel more connected to your constituents. I do, however, must express my dissatisfaction with the xenophobia, as Dalano would have mentioned at the start, that was taken on by the Unity Labour Party towards Chinese and so forth during that time. In fact, I thought that those were ads that the Facebook platform itself would have flagged, because really and truly they were in poor taste. I think that those of us who are in certain positions, there must be a level of level-headedness that we try to maintain when you're in a position of influence where people look up to you, where people listen to you and so forth, you really don't want to abuse it. I think that social media is a powerful tool, and we should not underestimate it. Because I mean, look at what it did for Obama. Look at the number of people that we have registered to our social media account in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We definitely should not underestimate it.
Augustine, do you feel the same way about social
You'll
media?
find that people come online and make their complaints as opposed to even going to their representative's office to make a complaint. So, yeah, I think it helps.
Well, Shadisha, I am happy you asked that question because not too long ago we were talking about democracy and the idea that it may not be as alive as some would like it to be. I see social media as adding to that process, democratization of the country, where people express themselves. I said 2 days ago, to show you how democracy is alive and well in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you have different media houses in this country now, and almost all of them have their own talk shows. You have Hot 97. I like to use examples. Hot 97, Boom SVG, Nice Radio, Star Radio, WFM in particular. And they all have talk shows of different nature, political, social issues. And you also have Praise FM, for those who are religious and would like to partake in that. And then you have social media. You have St. Vincent News, Ashburn News Network, Eyewitness News, and you also have, I also forgot to mention Extreme FM, which also. So there's a lot of media houses in this country, which is a good measurement to use in terms of talk shows that they have and people expressing themselves on many different issues. And you have the non-traditional news sites online, including Searchlight, which is mixture, traditional and non-traditional, utilizing social media now. So it's a lot of avenues people have in expressing themselves. Now, part of the problem, and this is why some persons may feel that, there's threat to freedoms. Freedom is responsibility, and you have to be responsible in what you say. I've seen also in this country many protests being done, but there's, of course, I've noticed, like Dalano and Barbados, I realized recently, same vaccination thing, there were thousands of persons who were marching in Barbados against the vaccination policy. But you had no real issue because people were orderly, they had the bullhorns and the like. You can't do that in St. Vincent and Grenadines. We've seen numerous protests in St. Vincent and Grenadines. The problem is where it gets out of hand. That's the problem. So there's democracy is alive and well in this country, and social media adds to that, where people express themselves, they make their posts, they make their comments. Even now, we are having this discussion and persons ask the questions, make the comments, and the like, adds to the democratization of this young democracy in St. Vincent and Grenadines.
We're about to close because we're running out of time. Do you believe that our teaching curriculum should be tailored to incorporate some aspect of civics or perhaps political studies in an effort to engender a sense of civic duty among our youth? Dalano?
Without a doubt, I think that is something that a lot of countries, not just in the region, but globally, are realizing that persons, that the knowledge, some of the things that we take for granted that persons may know, they really don't know, and they don't have the fundamental understanding of how governments work, of how societies work, how democracies work. The role of the governor general versus the president. There are a lot of things that we take for granted that people know that they don't know. And so absolutely, I think we need to be looking at that. I think we need to be engaging young people as early as possible, children from as early an age as possible in terms of this knowledge. And I think it can only serve to strengthen our democracy in terms of them understanding the processes, them having expectations, formulating ideas. And so because I think with that, then we have new ideas coming forward in terms of accountability, in terms of transparency, and so on. Because at the end of the day, a lot of persons, in terms of their knowledge of civics and so, it's only what they see being displayed in the public. And a lot of time, what they see displayed in the public is not the right way to do certain things, and the understanding is lacking. And so I think that could only help in terms of strengthening our democracy and getting people involved in the process. We can't take these things for granted anymore. I think that has become clear over the last, maybe, I want to say maybe 5 to 7 years, 2016 when President Trump was elected and so on, and even more recent. We can't take these things for granted. We have to make sure our people know the basics of our democracy.
So my very last question to each of you before we go, and I would like to thank our viewers for joining us this evening, is I would like you to leave us with your lasting impressions. And I'm bringing back the question that is our topic. Is party politics broken in SVG? I'll start with Augustine.
Well, I'll start from the beginning. Normally, it's mistaken that competitive politics is divisive. Now, I agree with Dalano, in particular with this, is that there must be change to the system. Because that is one thing I solely agree on, in that we operate under a Westminster system. And I'm talking about participation in politics. Even our constitution, I mean, like in Barbados right now, there's a discussion of the young man, Khalil, who is 18, and the Bajan government wanted him to become senator, but because of the restrictions from the constitution, he cannot be, and therefore they would have to make a amendment. It's the same in St. Vincent and Grenadines. I thought all this would be part of the discussion, where you have to be 21 years of age to actually be a member of parliament in the country. To me, the question is, if you can vote, to vote in a government or vote out a government, why shouldn't you then be able to, at the age of 18, sit as a member of parliament, So there needs to be changes from in the political system itself. I mean, I know we once went that route in 2000 and actually have the proposed constitution here. And I know in the proposed constitution, it actually said that, you can be 18 and be a member. That's one of the requirements along with being a CARICOM citizen. So these are changes that we have to go. Term limits, maybe another thing. In terms of governance, there's also maybe fixed term where you, as a leader of the house, more than likely won't just wake up one day and dissolve parliament, and use it to your own flexibility and have an upper hand. So all these things, I think in future, we would have to revisit. Sadly, in 2009, it failed because, again, we're talking about whether it's broken, but it's not broken, but the failure of this proposed document in 2009 was a result of the type of politics portrayed, where, one a group of society, including the opposition, didn't feel that going this direction, including Dr. DaSouza, integrity legislation, integrity commission was actually in this document. So these are some of the things that may help in terms of maturing our own politics in the future. But the question is, when would that be? That's the question.
Laverne, is party politics broken in SVG?
I one of the things that I continue to say as part of this discussion is honesty and being upfront. And I think that this is part of the thing. We can't expect more of the same and expect St. Vincent to get better with new people and new blood and fresher blood that's coming in, because I sit here and I listen to my dear friend, because we shout each other when we see each other on the road, hold up this document and pretend as though we need a referendum for these things to happen. It's totally disingenuous and I don't like it. For those of us who are fresh and young people in politics, we should really and truly try not to repeat the same mistakes of those that we see now not taking our country where we want it to be. And this is where we move beyond being just a party person. And I think that I'm a party person, but first and foremost, I'm a Vincentian who want to see our country do better. So it is disingenuous to hold up the paper and say, oh, this was in this and it was rejected, blah, blah, blah. We could still have integrity legislation without a referendum happening. We could still have many things happening. And I mean, we've seen the government go into parliament in one day and change laws and so forth. And some of the things that we want happen, if the government really wanted it to happen, it would be
Upon
there.
some of them, you need to towards majority Laverne.
That's the honest truth. Augustine, I can assure you that should your government bring the integrity legislation to office, there will be no problem in getting it passed.
Well, Laverne, we tried that with the first time. You said you'll agree, and we are now here.
Don't be disingenuous, all right? So, and the other thing that we need to look at, I remember the notion of talking about people being free to protest in Barbados and here and this and there and so forth. I tell you of one of my experiences when I went to protest action in Kingston. I was there one day and I feel as though sometimes, because remember, there's stimuli. If you come out to treat people as criminals and as though they don't have the right to be there, it creates a reaction, whether or not it is justified. Because when you come out with rifle guns and you're pointing, people feel agitated, people feel targeted. I remember standing one time in Kingston peacefully, and I was between some other people. I don't know if they know who I am or whatever, but I was held like this by a police officer and chopped off. And at this point, I am normally a very calm and reserved person. At this point, I turn around and it's a good thing somebody held me back. So to present it as though to say that rowdy people go to Kingston to create a problem, that's really also a disingenuous position to put forward. The truth is that the police should come out to help to make the protest action more peaceful and to serve as a protection for both people who are protesting and the business places and so forth. And the notion of having to ask for permission to protest is also totally ridiculous in a democracy. But if we come back to on the last point of more of the same, we see a lot people talk about we have new people in politics, but when the new people, for example, like young Gonzalez would say, NDP people would have to suffer and die. We see more of the same, and I would like to see where people like you, Augustine, people like Dalano, people like other young people who are in the youth arms of our political party are able to call them out when they're wrong, are able to stand up and say, listen, I don't like this, or this could be better, that could be better. I think that what our country needs now at this stage in our development are better civic citizens and less party loyalists. I think that that's what our country needs at this time. I think that as it relates to youth apathy, I think that when young people look on and see politicians in office get rich overnight, or if not them, their immediate families are suddenly driving big SUVs or suddenly appointed to jobs at the UN or suddenly the head of this and that, whereas other people have to work their way up. Those things cause people to grow despondent. I think that when over and over you as a young person interested in sports in your community, that you still don't have a lit playing field in your area. And I think as well to kind of say, oh, but them ain't do it when they've been there. You can't blame somebody of 20 years, 21 years ago for your failures now. You've had 21 uninterrupted years, and some of the things that really should be done aren't done. Just say, yes, I hear you, we can do better. Your excuse for it cannot be that it wasn't there 20 years ago. That's crap. It's unacceptable. It's an unacceptable excuse. I think finally that what we need to do is to truthfully look at how we can have more guild of students at the school levels, how we can have. I am actually a advocate of having political youth arms in schools. I think that it happens in Jamaica and other places where you may be able to join G2K or PNPYO and so forth, the youth arms. I think that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we need to have more younger people coming into politics who can who can see beyond their political colors and actually put St. Vincent first. And I think that we cannot achieve that without a change of government, because what we have now, what is stifling us now, is what we've already seen for the past how much ever years. And the philosophy and way of governance of the current regime is not going to change. We can only get better when we change the government so that we could have more young people involved and restore a sense of meritocracy in our country.
Thank you, Laverne. Dalano, I'd let you have the final say. Do you think that politics is broken in St. Vincent and the Grenadines?
To be honest, I think it's broken. I don't think it's beyond repair. I think it's, growing up, I don't know. My mom used to have these ornaments in the house, and sometimes they would break it, and you're gonna probably glue a contact cement to put it back together before she comes home from work. I think that's kind of how I would describe it. I think we are definitely at the impasse in terms of youth involvement. I think the young people are looking for a more progressive politics that they're not seeing in this current government, and that they may not necessarily be seeing in the opposition parties either. I mean, I have no choice but to respond to what Augustine said about the proposed constitution, because I don't know if you guys remember, Shadisha, remember we had a lecture in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Dr. Balkan actually pointed out that a lot of what was in the constitution could have actually gone forward before. But I think this government has taken an approach where, okay, it didn't happen in the referendum, and we've kind of just pushed a lot of those things aside when they really could have done a lot more in terms of a piecemeal approach. But that's separate and apart from that. I think in terms of the young people, we want more accountability. We want more transparency. We want to see, we want freedom of expression in terms of being free to say what we, not what we want in terms of disregarding, disregarding laws and so on, but obviously with a sense of responsibility. But I think this sort of heavy-handed approach that we've seen from the government in recent times and so has not bode well for young people in terms of involvement. I think there are serious concerns about nepotism. I think there's serious concerns about cronyism and a lack of meritocracy. I think the economy isn't working for young people. We spoke about joblessness. Laverne would have spoken about youth unemployment. I would have spoken about the fact that the government continues to carry too much of the economy, and they're not doing enough to facilitate private sector-led growth. That's something that continues. Of course, we could talk about the prime grants and so on and efforts to do so. In my mind, it's not enough. I think we have to realize that you cannot divorce your economy from your civics and your social engagement and so on. And if there's a culture of intimidation and fear and so on and political victimization, then your economy is not going to thrive in the way that it should. So we can't divorce that. And I'm saying to you that there is that perception that is where St. Vincent is. So we could talk about investment of foreign investment and so on. Perhaps those might come, but of course, when persons who are looking at St. Vincent and the Grenadines in terms of deciding whether or not they want to invest, they're in their mind, they're looking at the political regime, they're looking at how business is done, and so on. And if that culture is as pervasive as I think it is, then that's a red flag for some businesses looking for investment as well. And I'm not saying that to knock St. Vincent, not the government in any way. The reality is, as an investor looking for somewhere to invest, these are the things that you look at. We all do the pest analysis. We all do. These are things that we did in school in terms of the legal, the economic, and the opportunities. We know all of these things, and we know that these things are. So until the economy is working for young people, I think there's going to be that divide. I think our politics is too divisive. And Augustine would have made the point about it being divisive or competitive. That would be the case if that stopped after the election, and it doesn't. We have in St. Vincent and the Grenadines billboards still up from election and being replaced and so on. Those sort of things build a climate that is not in keeping. And I saw a comment that's come up about speaking truth to power. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, people do not believe that they can speak truth to power currently. And young people in particular feel marginalized economically, socially. And if you feel marginalized economically and socially, what reason do you have to be engaged politically? And I'll end it there.
Food for thought indeed. Thank you so much. We have run out of time. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. This is all for the press room this evening. See you next time, same place. Good evening.